Okay, well, welcome everybody. I know that it's cold in Florida and we're all sitting here complaining, but we get to be snug in our homes, and our authors are knee deep in snow, stuck in hotel rooms and all over the place. So, just suck it up in Florida. This is our winter and it's not so terrible. I am so excited, and it looks like all of you are too, because this is a great turnout. We have Fiona Davis, and I don't know if you can see how I'm holding this book up, but The Magnolia Palace is her new book, which is fantastic. If you've ever read Fiona, oh, thank you for that. If you've ever read Fiona, you know that she picks a wonderful building in New York City and builds a story about it in two time periods. And this is the Frick Mansion and now the Frick Museum that some of you have been to in New York, me included. So it's a great story, and Frick is a fascinating character. He has a very complicated plus and minus kind of history to him, a great art collector and a sort of spotty reputation in terms of his relation to people and unions and workers. So he is a fascinating character, and she's going to be in conversation with another best-selling, one of my favorite authors, Christina Baker Kline. I just bought one of her novels, The Exiles, because that's the last one I read. And if you've read her, The Orphan Train, or her book about Wyeth, she also does great historical fiction. And this one is set in Australia, three wonderful women whose lives intersect and come together. So we couldn't have a better thing to get us through our cold nights, and we're all snuggled up. I've got my cup of tea, and I'm just so looking forward to it. I'm going to get out of the way. I wish you could come visit us. It'll be warmer in Florida. We're right by the ocean, Fiona can tell you. And thank you so much, Fiona. I'm so excited, and people are so excited to be reading your book. So I turn it over to you two. Have at it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, I just want to say I'm with Fiona, who I probably live like 25 blocks from in New York City, but I'm in Maine in a blizzard at the moment. It's ridiculous. And Fiona is stuck in a hotel room in North Carolina. So if you're having any problem seeing us, that's why. It's crazy. But I was privileged 3 days ago to be in New York City and to witness Fiona's launch party reading. I think the first live event at Rizzoli Books in this very beautiful, trendy part of New York City, downtown, packed house, everybody eager to see what the new Fiona Davis novel was. And here it is, as you guys know, it's the Magnolia Palace. And I just want to read my own blurb. It's very short, but I'm going to quickly open by saying, Fiona Davis is at the top of her game, and she really is. A family saga and a historical thriller in one, The Magnolia Palace is a fast-paced, immersive delight. I love this book so much, and I'm going to let you speak, I promise, but I just want to quickly say what Fiona does so well, as all of you know, I mean, there are more than 80 people here, which is incredible for a Zoom event years into COVID. But what Fiona does so well is that she brings to life these landmark places that some people don't know a lot about. And the Frick Museum in New York is kind of a hidden wonder. It's a beautiful place. I hope all of you get a chance to go to it after reading it, this book especially. But you marry a story in the past and a story in the present to let your readers experience New York in a way that is probably entirely new. It certainly was for me when I read this book. I mean, I've been to the Frick half a dozen times myself, and I never knew any of this. So I would love for you, Fiona, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want you to tell those of your readers who haven't yet read the book and don't yet know what it's about, exactly what the story is.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for doing this. You are one of my favorite authors, and I've been looking forward to this for so long. As Christina mentioned, she's in a blizzard in Maine. I'm stuck in a hotel room in North Carolina. I didn't quite get home, but I luckily have a background that matches my outfit, so it's not so bad.
Great.
So the Frick collection is this beautiful gem of a museum. As you said, it's a wonder in New York City on Fifth Avenue, and it's not like the museums like the Guggenheim or the Met, where it was a residence. It was the home of Henry Clay Frick and his family. When he died, he left it and to be open to the public as a bequest. So when you walk inside, it's as if the room it's just frozen in time. You have the dining hall and the living room, his big art gallery. There's all the furnishings, the ceramics, the enamels, and when you walk inside, it's as if the Frick family has gone off to a dinner party and they might be back at any moment. And so because of that, I think it's so true. So many New Yorkers say that it's their favorite museum. And so when I decided,
yeah, a treasure.
Yes, absolutely. An absolute treasure. Because he was this huge art collector. He collected Turners, Renoirs, Rembrandts. There are 34 Vermeers in the world, and 3 of them are at the Frick. So it's this really valuable art collection. When he died in 1919, it was valued at $40 million. So you can only imagine what it's like inside. And so I thought this would be really fun for a dual timeline novel, because you have 2 different ways the building was used. It was a mansion where you had the Frick family, where you had Henry, his wife Adelaide, and his adult daughter Helen, who was in her late 20s around then when they moved in 1914. And so it was a family of 3 served by a staff of 27, which is quite a ratio. And so in the book, I have it in 2 timelines. In 1919, it's from the point of view of this artist's model who's very celebrated, who falls upon hard times in this scandal. And she ends up taking a job working as the private secretary to Helen Frick, who's very prickly and temperamental, in the mansion. And she's caught up in the family drama, including stolen pink diamond, known as the Magnolia diamond, and romantic trysts and all that kind of thing. And then the second timeline is 1966. And that's from the point of view of a fashion model named Veronica. And she's doing a Vogue photo shoot at the Frick Museum. It just goes terribly wrong. And she ends up trapped inside during a 3-day blizzard, which, Christina, you can understand. And she's trapped inside with this intern named Joshua, and she stumbles upon a series of hidden messages that are tucked within the artwork at the Frick. And it leads her and Joshua, the intern, on this scavenger hunt. And one that she really hopes might solve all of her financial problems and might also solve a decades-old murder in the Frick family. So that's it in a nutshell. It's kind of complicated.
What I love about your work, and with all of these books you've done, the Chelsea Girls, of course, and Lines of Fifth Avenue, and then this one, and you're just doing this beautiful job of melding fact and fiction. And by the way, I love the fact that the people in this room are commenting on the side and asking questions. So I'm going to actually sort of start incorporating questions that people have, because I think that's really fun. And if you guys have more questions, just write them in the side, and I'm going to let you ask these questions. But one person asks, how do you ever decide how to do fact versus fiction? Where does fiction come in when you're working with a story? And I have the same problem myself, but we're talking about you tonight. But how do you figure out where fact ends and fiction begins?
Yeah, it's all in the research. And I don't know if it's this way for you too, but I start researching and I'm always surprised at things that happened in the past. And I know if something really shocks me, that it should probably be in the book. And what I tend to do is take real life people and possibly use them as an inspiration. Within this book, there's a person who's completely made up, a main character. That's Veronica, the model in the 60s. You have a person who was a real person, Helen Frick. And then you have a person who's inspired by a real person, which is Lillian, who's inspired by Audrey Munson, who we can talk about later, who's fascinating. And with each one, it's just a matter of figuring out what will serve the story best. And so it's taking these real things that happened in history, like a scaffolding, and then layering on fictional things that happen, blended with things that are fact. And it's really, once I figure out what the story will be and who the characters are, it's a matter of figuring out what serves the story and the plot the best, and then explaining it really, really well in the author's notes so people understand what was made up and what is true.
So Anissa, I believe is how you pronounce it, asks, and this is very sort of apropos of what you just said, who is the hardest character to write in this amazing book and why?
It was definitely Helen Frick. She was a real person, first of all, which is really intimidating. But also she was really intimidating. She was this adult daughter.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, yeah, I want to hear who she is.
Yeah. She was fascinating. She was, as I said, very prickly. Her father was really tough, and they had a very, very tight relationship, but they also fought. There was a tragedy when she was very young that made her mother really retreat from view. And so she became her father's confidant socially and in terms of the art collecting. And they would fight and have huge arguments. But at the same time, they absolutely loved each other, and they absolutely loved the art. They were really devoted to it. It was both of their passions. And so, but this was a woman who, back in the 20s, if any of her friends bobbed their hair, which was a super popular hairstyle back then, she would drop them. She wore a pompadour and a bun pretty much her entire adult life. She was just very strict in what she thought was right and what was not. She hated Germans. And so, she created this beautiful art reference library next door to the Frick, but Germans were not allowed in, even if you had a German last name, you couldn't come in, and you would never be employed there. She just...
You know why she hated Germans? What was
Yeah, see, here's her contradiction exactly, is that the reason for that came from the fact that during World War II in 1917, she created a Red Cross unit and went with it over to France to help the refugees. And of course, the Germans were the enemy at that point. And it just was deeply embedded in her that Germans are bad. And she carried with that her entire adult life. She never let up on it. To her, once something was in her head, that's the way it was. And so she was fun to write because she's a great contrast to my artist's muse and model, who's kind of a wild child. And so the two of them create a really interesting dynamic as a writer to bounce them off each other and create conflict, but also they both are very vulnerable in certain ways, which can bring them together.
So one of the things I'm really enjoying is seeing your posts about the book. And you posted today, I think, some pictures of Lillian Carter, the real life inspiration. And by the way, if any of you are not following Fiona on her Facebook author page, it's actually really fascinating because you get the behind the scenes story of the book. So tell us a little bit about Lillian Carter and who she was and how she inspired you and what people might find if they come to New York.
Yes. So Lillian Carter is the character in the book who is inspired by this real life model named Audrey Munson, who I mentioned earlier. And Audrey Munson was this celebrated artist muse who posed for sculptors all during the early 1900s. And she was considered an absolute beauty. And I posted a photo of her up, and she had this aquiline nose and a small chin and narrow shoulders and curvy hips. And she was considered the ultimate neoclassical beauty of the day and widely lauded and celebrated. And her image can be found on statues throughout Manhattan. And I posted a map today of, the Brooklyn Museum. She's in front of the New York Public Library. She rises from the fountain in front of the Plaza Hotel. She's at Columbus Circle. For anyone who's in New York, you can tell she is just everywhere. She's carved into the pediment above the entrance to the Frick. And that's where I first discovered her. And in real life, she got caught up in this terrible scandal with her landlord, which is mentioned in the book. And she and her mother kind of fled upstate. And then she tried to get into film, and that went terribly. And, here she was so successful, and she ended up trying to commit suicide by drinking mercury. And eventually her mother put her in an asylum where she died in 1996 at the age of 104. And then her family, she was buried in an unmarked grave at that time. And it's just so sad to me, this woman who's been lost to history, who, we know the names of the sculptors who created the work, but no one knows the name of the woman who posed for it. And in many ways, I feel like both Helen Frick and Audrey Munson were shadowed by their father, by Helen by her father, and Audrey by the sculptor she worked with. They were completely overshadowed by them, and they're just not as important in history, when I feel like these are two really cool women connected by the Frick Mansion who we should know about. And so Lillian's character is inspired by her, and I changed the name because I knew I wanted to change the trajectory of her life in order to make my plot work. And so in the book, she's Lillian, but there's a lot that's really factual about her. And if anyone's interested, I know people have really kind of responded to her. There's a wonderful biography on her called Curse of Beauty. And it has all these photos and some really great backgrounds. So you can see what really happened.
Fiona, you have sort of, I would say, pioneered this genre kind of writing about place in this way, focusing in your case on New York City, looking at these different landmarks and kind of giving people a way in, I think, that helps them have a real sense of sort of exploration. Like, you're not only writing novels where you've got sort of made up characters, whatever, and a historical moment, but you also have so much information about the places you're writing about, whether, as I said, the Chelsea Hotel, New York Public Library.
Oh no, I think you froze a little.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
There you go. Yeah, now you're back. You're back.
So, right, and here we are at the Frick, I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that this is something that came to you, someone asks, like, how do you discover your subjects? Did it happen organically, or did you sort of come up with this idea of writing about New York City landmarks?
That's such a good question. It definitely came organically. And what happened was I found a story around the Barbizon Hotel for Women when I was a journalist that I thought would be a really great article, but the sources just weren't there to write it. And I couldn't shake it. And I thought, well, maybe this will be a good, book, and I'll try writing that and just see where it goes. And that ended up being The Dollhouse, my debut. And I think the reason I turned to a building next, and the next building I chose was the Dakota, was that I was a journalist, and the idea of writing just a book, making everything up, was utterly terrifying. I don't know how people do it. It's almost like the crutch of the building that I could then research and kind of tag on to real things that happened and real facts that amaze me, and then bring it out from there. For me, I feel like it just comes from being scared. And so and there's many in New York City to choose from. I joke around, I'll be doing like the gas station on the corner of 12th Avenue and, 13th. But I'll make it work.
You definitely will make it work. There's no question about that. So when you were doing this story, and with a number of your novels, I think many, you have a present day story and a backstory. And by the way, for some reason, I have no picture of you at the moment, but I know you're going to come back, so I'm not worried about it.
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you approach this the modern day, the present day storyline as opposed to the past? Like what imaginative and research faculties did you bring to that?
Yeah, that was a fun one. I chose the 1960s because I hadn't worked in it before. It was a completely new decade for me. So I thought that would be fun. And I thought it would be long enough away from when it was a residence so that now it's a working museum, that's what it's known as. And so I could really show how it's changed over time. And then I decided to give myself a bit of a challenge where I decided to make it a limited number of characters, a limited location, and a limited timeline. So it's 2 characters trapped in the Frick over 3 days. And to me, that was kind of fun to see what I could do to really create tension and create a relationship that's very strong from a set of strangers over the course of 96 hours. And so it was kind of a way to play with that second timeline, because the first had so much going on. I thought this would be a way to bring people into the artwork of the museum, also without pounding them over the head of here's some famous art. By having the scavenger hunt part of it, it makes it more fun, and you also just feel like you get to know what's on the walls of the museum a little deeper.
Fiona, here's a great question that actually I think you talked about the other night at the live event that I came to that you did, which is, did COVID have an impact on your ability to research the book?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know about you for what you're working on now, but it definitely did. got this wonderful behind the scenes tour of the Frick in January of 2020. And then of course, in March, we went into lockdown. And normally at that point, I'm returning to the building multiple times to visit and look around the corners and, really understand it. And also going out and interviewing people. So instead, I did a lot of Zoom interviews with experts in the art world and in the era. And luckily, the Frick at frick.org has this wonderful floor plan where you can click in any room and do a 360-degree view. And so that was wonderful because, I could, if I was wondering what's above the fireplace in the library, jump in that room within one click, I'm looking at it, back to my work. And so in a way, that was such a gift, and I couldn't have written it without it. And on top of that, the Frick does a lot of digital archives. So I could look at, the staff payroll to see who worked there and how much were they paid and what was their job. I could look at a dinner menu from a dinner party in 1915 and incorporate that into the book. And so in a way, thank goodness for the internet and the modern age. What I did miss, and I don't know if you had the same thing with this, was when you're out and about and you're writing a book and you're not thinking about the book, that's sometimes when problems get solved. It's like you have a sticky plot point and you're out taking the bus across town and it's like, oh yeah, I should do that. Or you see someone on the street and think, oh, that's a great that's who I'll model one character after. That I love that person's face. I'll use that. And that serendipity was really, really missed when we were all locked down.
Definitely. I think I've frozen. I don't know why. I'm sorry, but
I can see you. I can see you and hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So you were mentioning the other day, and I hope it's not giving something away to say this, that your next novel might not involve two timelines, that you're writing a novel set entirely, I believe, in the past. Is that right?
Kind of.
Can you talk?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the next book, and then I'm going to actually ask you what your next book is, because I know people are dying to know that. The next book is set at Radio City Music Hall, and it's from the point of view of a Rockette in the 1950s. And that came after I heard one reached out to me, a woman in her 80s who'd been a Rockette in the 50s. And she, shared so much wonderful info with me and just sent me off in a really, really fun direction. But the book is bookended by modern times when she's an older woman. And so it really is kind of her looking back at her life. So I do have two timelines in there. It's just not quite as intense as, say, the Frick.
Okay. Can I just say, you told an actually really fun story last time when I was there the other day about how this Rockette came to you. Can you share that? Because I think your fans would love to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So I was really wondering what building to do. And there's so many in New York, sometimes I feel a little paralyzed. And I got an email through my website of a woman saying, I was a Rockette and I'm in my 80s. And if you have any questions or you want to know the secrets of Radio City Music Hall, you should reach out to me. And within, I think, 2 hours, I had emailed her back and said, hey, let's talk. And we've had a number of interviews. And she sent me some of her wonderful archival material that she'd saved, which, when you're working in the past, that's the key. What was the schedule like for a Rockette? When did they take a break? How many shows did they do a day in the 50s? And it's just been really fun to work on. And what about you, though? Can you give us a quick preview of what your next book will be?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about that story is that all these people who are commenting right now and all the people who are listening know that there are these incredible stories that other people have access to that you don't necessarily know, and that you were able to really hone in on that and see how important that was, and how, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to talk to someone who was a Rockette in this period, and it really could inform an entire book. It's very exciting. So yeah, my next novel is inspired by a family story in my own family from Civil War era North Carolina. So yet again, and look, you are all over the map, not literally, like you're actually sort of in a geographical region, but you have all these time periods and all these dual time periods. I feel like it was probably a lot to bite off to write about the Civil War after doing Australia in the 1840s and Maine in the 1920s. there are so many Civil War buffs who know what they're talking about. And so it's a little bit overwhelming to enter this fray. But, but that's what we do, right? That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what I can't
that's...
wait to read it. That sounds wonderful. And the fact that it's a family story. Oh, she may have just jumped off. We'll give her a moment to come back. The fact that what she's doing is a family story is really, that's what makes it really spectacular. And I'll tell you, for me, writing about art history and famous artists was absolutely intimidating. But, the best I'd done is I took an art history class back in college, and it was pass fail, and luckily I passed. So, hey, I guess that means I should write an entire book about it. But I think because I was a journalist, I'm happy to go out and find experts who can tell me what's important. And, and that way I can draw on people who really know what they're talking about and incorporate it into the book. All right, she may have been stuck in the blizzard, poor Christina, but we can open it up to questions, I think. Rona, if you want to.
Yeah, that's fine. And if she comes back, we'll be more than happy to invite her back in. First of all, I have to tell you, you're getting a lot of love on these comments, literally hearts. And, I love your books. I've read all your books. I'm so excited about Carnegie Hall and the Radio City Music Hall. And so heart. They're really responding to you. And as one of your fans, I would ask a few questions and then I'll funnel some of theirs. I found it fascinating the perspective you had on women in two time periods, 1919 and 1966. And, are they really that different or that the same, sort of, having gone through that time period and come of age in that time period, I can tell you, lots of things changed, but they had a lot of changing to do. So what was your perspective on those two women at those different times?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. For me, I was really interested in these two women who are used to being looked at because they're models. And what is that like for the one in the earlier time period? For Lillian, it's welcome. She's very comfortable with it and it's all good. Hi, Christina. Hey. No worries.
It's just okay. Keep talking.
No worries. It's very exciting. Your blizzard, I can only imagine what it's like.
Exciting for us because we're not in it,
Yeah. I was just answering a question about comparing these two women over time. And I was just saying that, because they're both models, they're both used to being looked at, but they're not necessarily used to being seen. And that is what I'm really trying to look at in the book is what makes your career and your life fulfilling. And what is it if it's just the surface? If that's what you're selling, then how do you go about to create a satisfying life around that? And I think especially in the very early scene with Veronica in the 60s, her treatment by the photographer of the Vogue shoot, it really just pushes her to the limit because she's a pretty reluctant model to start with.
Yeah, I thought that was a great theme, that so much time, almost 50 years in between, and yet some things didn't change. They were both in desperate situations trying to figure out how to get seen and to get heard and taken seriously. So I thought that was a fascinating comparison. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Rona, can I ask one more question of Fiona?
You can ask as many as you want. Yes, please.
So Fiona, this is a little bit of a departure from your book, but this week you went in a very public way on, I think, Good Morning America writing to talk about the fact that you have a diagnosis, fairly recent diagnosis. And I think that I was saying to you before we began in our green room that I found it so incredibly inspiring and courageous, and also I think impactful for people. And I just wondered if you would mind talking a little bit about it.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. Yeah, I have to say the response to that essay, and you can find it on gma.com, has just been beyond what I expected. And what happened to me was in 2020, I just got this funny twitchy arm. And I thought, oh, it's, I'm nervous. I have a big book coming out. It's just that. And I went to a neurologist, and the day after The Lines of Fifth Avenue hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was, an incredible day, I went to the neurologist and got the diagnosis of Parkinson's, which I thought, that can't be right. I'm in my 50s. That I thought that struck people in their 80s. Well, it doesn't. And it's really, really widespread. It's increased 35% over the past 10 years. And I think a lot of people don't talk about it because it is associated with being old. And, you know, you have Michael J. Fox, of course, who's doing incredible things, who was diagnosed very young. And I just thought, you know, I don't want to hide it. And I may have a twitchy arm at a book talk at some point. Luckily, right now, the meds are working beautifully, but it's a progressive disease and there's no cure. And I just feel like the more people kind of come out and say, hey, I have Parkinson's, the more power we have to change things like get more funding for research and figure out a cure, and also ban certain pesticides and chemicals that are banned elsewhere, but in America they're not, paraquat and DTE specifically. And that, you know, it requires collective action to change things. And if we can do that and everybody comes out and says, hey, yep, me too. And I've heard so many people who've reached out to me and say that they have either a similar disease or the same one, that it's really, the outpouring of the response has been beyond my dreams.
Well, the idea that you're embarking on this, you know, new book, that you have done this book and now are out promoting it, and that you're doing this at the same time, I think is incredibly inspiring to people. I mean, even if people don't have Parkinson's, lots of people live with chronic illness of various kinds. And I think seeing you out there willing to talk about it openly is incredibly helpful to people.
Yeah.
And to be able to do it as a person, as an author too. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, everyone has something. Carol Fitzgerald had emailed me and she said, yep, everyone has something and this is your something. And that's right. And, but it's nice to be able to share it. And so thank you. Thank you for asking about that. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it broadens the experience for everyone who knows you, you know, either personally or knows your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rona, do you have another question? I have plenty.
I would just echo your sentiments and say that you're getting a lot of responses from your fans right now saying that, you know, sending you good thoughts and telling you how courageous you are and really thanking you for that. And I think that that's important. And you do have a platform and a voice. And so there are lots of people like your models who can't get heard or seen, and you can. And boy, lots of hearts from Anissa. So people do appreciate that you're willing to, you know, come out and publicly make that statement, because it does help everybody else who feels like they're alone and nobody's listening to them. They're just sort of, you know, suffering in the wilderness, especially during a pandemic when people are so isolated and don't have people to talk to give them that sense. You know, I always say when things are good, you want to be unique. When things are bad, you want to be just like everybody else. So
I like that. And, you know, it was interesting because when it started really twitching, it was right in when we were all in quarantine. And so I was doing a ton of Zoom talks and I could cut off the camera so you couldn't see it. And so I could go out and, you know, meet hundreds of readers and no one would know. But I just thought that's not the way to do it. You know, it's that why keep it a secret? There's so many people that have it. Let's get it out there. I feel like almost like it's like breast cancer in the 70s where people were ashamed. And these days people are yelling it from the rooftops because that's how you change things.
It is how you change things. And it's got to be easier for you as well. You know, you don't need that extra added burden of having to keep that secret. That's a big secret to spend your life trying to hide. So, you know, I think.
Well, it's also that thing of like, be kind, because everybody's carrying a great burden. I mean, I think it helps for people to see that you're human and you are bearing this. And, you know, we all have stuff, as you said, and it somehow, I think, even deepens the relationship that your fans have with you and that people who read your books have. And to know, you know, to know what you're going through and to be part of that journey too.
So thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody listening. It's absolutely wonderful.
And the last comment that just showed up is, thank you for sharing your personal story, Fiona. It touched me so much. And there's a certain amount of grace that goes with that. But, you know, you're also entitled to have bad days and yell and scream and cuss. So that's good, too.
Yeah, like me last
You
night.
don't always have to handle things with grace. It's okay.
Yeah, that was like me last night in South Carolina at the airport trying to get home and failing.
Yeah, you just can't control those things.
Impossible.
That's why they call those things, you know, the weather. It is never covered in any kind of insurance there. You know, acts of God and the weather. Those are just, you know, things you can't.
But I do have to say that the kind of the writers in New York City, there's just a really big group of us, and getting through Zoom and being able to see each other again, it's just been such a joy because, you know, there's just a huge group of us who all connected later in life. So it's not like we all knew each other in our 20s. And it's just wonderful, the bond we share. So I really appreciate you coming out and moderating. It means so much.
Well, Fiona and I have, I was just going to say, I moved to New York 3 years ago, then COVID happened. But even before that, we sort of formed this group with like maybe 20 writers who do kind of, many of you would know a bunch of them. Yeah. And it's just so much fun to be able to be part of that with Fiona and to sort of experience the joy, cheer each other on, you know, and be able to discuss the hard things as well, like COVID, all the stuff that's happened, of course, for all of us and for writers too. It's no different. We have our own challenges with distribution and everything else. So it's just been kind of delightful. But Fiona, to change the subject quickly, I want to ask about the cover, because this is, I love, you have a figure on this cover as you've had on other covers, but it's a smaller one. And how did you come up with this? Because it's so beautiful.
Oh, isn't it wonderful? I've had so many people reach out to me and say that they don't read historical fiction, but they picked this book up because of the cover. And all the kudos goes to Christopher Lynn, who is the art director at Dutton, who publishes my books. And he created it. He's the one who came up with it. You know, I knew it would be kind of a black and white version of the mansion with a figure out front. That seems to be the trend of historical fiction. But the fact that he wrapped it with those magnolia blossoms just, you know, blew it out of this world. Yeah. And I love the font. I loved everything about it. Yeah, they did a great job. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you consult on your covers? Do you, like, how involved are you?
Yeah, you know, I kind of got them, I sent them some images of the Frick, and they played around with it, and it wasn't quite working. And then I found this image of the front entrance, and that worked. They did the wrapping of the flowers immediately, which I absolutely loved. And then it's just things like, hey, let's make the band on her hat a little brighter, or, you know, there's something in the thing that needs to be photoshopped, you know. Yeah, so it's just a matter of making those small touches. And then we all agree, and we all, from the get-go, we're like, yep, this is great. There was no hiding the fact that it was a brilliant design.
So in this age of, we're in between right now, we've, you know, COVID is, as we know, is ongoing, endemic, apparently. And yet we're all trying to figure out how to move forward. What is it like for you? You had a book come out at the beginning, which was very unusual. And now you have this. So how is it different with these two books on these two ends of COVID?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. That's so interesting. Yeah, the first one came out in August and everything was virtual. So I did it all from my house just north of the city. And then this one, there's just, you know, I'm able to go to South Carolina and do 2 wonderful luncheon events and meet readers in person. And the launch was in person, and there's a lot going on down the road in March, and you can check my website for those details. But it feels like we're opening up, and, you know, we can go forward, and it's just wonderful. It's wonderful to give a book talk and hear people laugh instead of just see them, you know. It's just getting the energy back. And I did one yesterday with Litchfield Books and Movable Feast. And boy, the love. And I think readers are excited to meet writers again, and writers are excited to sign books and hear stories. And so it feels great, I have to say. It's just perfect.
Can you talk a little bit about to me, your books are so, I don't know if Rona's talking, but your books are so cinematic. And tell me what kind of movement you have is there any film stuff going on or series stuff happening?
Well, we'll see. There's been interest. It's very expensive to do dual timeline historical fiction. I can only imagine the costs involved. But I feel like when you see Queen's Gambit and The Crown, I think there's a real hunger for historical fiction on the screen. So we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed. I think it would be fun. I'd love to see someone play Helen Frick. I think that would be great.
Well, I was going to ask you next, who would be characters in this? Who might play these characters? Who would play the incredible, Angelica,
Oh, I love it. I see as Mr. Frick Anthony Hopkins. I think he would be great because he's got that cold, glassy stare, but yet he can be a soft teddy bear as well. And I'd love for Helen, I feel like Emma Stone she's the right coloring, and also she can play tough. And I think that would be fun. And then I love for either Lillian or Veronica, the woman who starred in Queen's Gambit, Anya Taylor-Joy. I think
unbelievable,
right? She's got the big eyes and that classical face. So yeah. So we're done. We're all ready. Let's shoot it.
I think that's good. I think we've got it all set. You've done all the work. You know who we want to play. And so do you have advice for aspiring writers? Is there let's say there are people in our audience today who might be interested in writing a book set in the past. What would your advice to them be about how to get started?
Yeah, I would say, do a ton of research and find out what really surprises you and find a period that you really want to know about and explore the fashions and what did people eat and build your story that way. And then don't get too caught up in the research. At a certain point, you have to put it aside. And I'm sure you feel this way too. I just hit a tipping point where I need to put the research aside and start figuring out the plot and the characters. And so you need to kind of do that mix. And it's so hard to know when to turn away from the rabbit hole of research because it can be really, really fun. And then for me, I write a really fast first draft and I don't go back and edit. I just kind of let it rip. And then I go back and read it and start, really, really making it work and make it sing. So yeah, just be open and check it out. It's so much fun writing about the past. I absolutely love it. And, you always have something great to talk about at the dinner table.
You do. Fiona, do you have a a goal per day or week that you do, or is it more like you just sort of want to get it out as quickly as you can?
Yeah, no, I do about 1,500 words a day, 4 days a week. And it takes about 2 to 3 hours. And then after about 4 months, I'll have a first draft at that point. And it's painful. First draft, so painful. Hate it, but you just got to do it.
It's so painful. Hey, I just discovered we have all these questions. I don't know if we still have 15 minutes. I think we do, or whatever, a few more minutes. So I'm gonna ask you some of these great questions. So what is the process of being a book of the month pick?
Yeah. Oh, that was so exciting. We learned about it about a month beforehand, and then you're sworn to secrecy and you can't tell anyone, which is really, really hard. And it was just wonderful. They're great to work with. And the fact that the book came out a few weeks before its official launch through Book of the Month really gave it traction because people were talking about it for 3 good weeks before the book came out. I have to say I'm blown away by the response. And they're wonderful to work with. I've written a couple essays for them on other books that made Book of the Month. And it's just a crack team. And I'm, absolutely honored and grateful. I had no idea this would happen.
And it's a huge boost to the book.
Yeah. Massive.
Wonderful. Here's a great question from Lorraine. She asks, do you know the murder and mystery answers before you start?
I do. I figure out that plot. And usually that comes pretty early. I know what's going to be the big reveal and I know who's going to do it. Because that's the only way I can go back and as I'm writing, hide that information. Because I love books with plot twists and that surprise you. And the only way to do that is to really know beforehand. So you're pointing people in the wrong direction. You're, muddying up the waters so that hopefully when it is revealed, It's a surprise, but it's also really, really inevitable because the logic makes sense.
Is that true in all of the books you write? Like, do you always know the answers before you start?
For the big twist, yeah. Yep. Somehow that comes really, really early. And so that's what I work back from every time.
You must be sort of have an intuitive sense of plot, it sounds like.
Yeah, I love books that have that have me on pins and needles, and that there's a lot of tension because I want to know what really happened. And so I think that's the way I write my books, is looking for that tension. And it's a matter of finding characters that can surprise you as you're working on them, and really getting to know the characters to really be able to pull that off. But that's part of the fun.
And part of the research, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a good question. Lori asks, did you get access to the Frick? I know we talked about it a little bit, but especially during COVID, how did that work?
They were wonderful. So in January of 2020, I got this behind the scenes tour where they took me everywhere, to the fur vault, to the bowling alley that's in the basement that really exists. And their archivists were really wonderful in helping me answer questions. I could interview them, pointing me in the right direction if I was stuck. And they've even been wonderful, after it's come out, we're kind of working on these events, and these fun things are bubbling up as a way to kind of partner up with them. And it's wonderful. The Frick at the moment is closed for renovation, but they've moved everything to the Frick Madison, which is just, a few blocks away. And it's a great place to see the artwork. And you can also walk by the mansion and check it out. So there's a lot going on there. And I highly recommend, if you're in New York City, checking it out.
You were saying the other day that it seems that whatever you write about gets renovated right after you finish.
I know, whatever it is. Really, like the Chelsea Hotel. Well, I realized you can't get into many of my places. The Barbizon Hotel is private. The Dakota, no way are you getting in there. The Chelsea Hotel has been under renovation for years. The Lions of Fifth Avenue, the library, closed down for COVID right as the book came out. And now the Frick is closed for renovation. So yeah, I have this I feel bad for Radio City because they're in for it.
They're definitely in for it. Some great questions coming up here. Okay, so I don't know if it was already asked, but is there a reason you chose 1966, or did you pick it at random?
No, as I mentioned earlier, I did it because I hadn't worked in that time period before, and it would be, it would be something different. The styles, the clothes, the way people would speak. So that's really where that came from. But I also needed it to be far enough from the original story that there is a mystery that has to be solved. Right. Yep.
Okay. So do you think you'll ever write, ask Carmen, about a landmark that is not a building, or consider writing about a landmark in another city?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that would be fun. I always say I'd love to do a book set in London. Would be really interesting. I love the old Crumlin Manor House. So send me to England and let me go.
Oh, my God. That would be
and also, you have things in New York, and some, this should be written about. Seneca Village was this part of Central Park where it was a Black community before it was Central Park. And it was basically raised in order to create the park. And there's still all these artifacts buried there. And I feel like someone needs to write that book about someone in Seneca Park, before and after, because it was a dynamic time in New York City. And I would read that book in a minute.
But you would not write it.
No. I feel like someone, who's Black would need to be the person who owns that and writes that. I would not feel comfortable diving into that.
I'm sure. I would imagine that there must be people working on it. I feel like it's such an incredible story that we know about, and there must be people working on it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nonfiction people working on Seneca Village. I bet you there's a PhD student out there doing it.
I would think so too. Okay, just quickly, when does the Rockette story maybe come out? Do you have any sense?
It would be sometime next year. It's still early days, but I'm taking a little longer in between books. I couldn't do a book a year to keep that pace up now that there's more promotion involved. And so it'll be sometime probably near the end of next year.
I was going to say, but you're saying it's still next year, so that's not a huge delay.
No.
And then here are a couple of related questions. Did you send the Frick, this is from Doris. Hi, Doris. Did you send the Frick employees copies of Magnolia Palace, and what has their response in general been to your book?
Oh, they've been wonderful. I've been working very closely with the communications and marketing department, and a number of people there have read the book and enjoyed it. They had a couple of things that needed to be fixed, factual things, which I was really glad to hear, and could, really minor things, but if you're dealing with history, you want to make sure it's right. So it's just been great. The response from the staff has been terrific, and they were real partners to work with. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fun stuff coming down the road.
That's super exciting. And then here's a question, a more general question. Who are your favorite authors?
Oh, I like that. I love Geraldine Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, I love Geraldine Brooks. I love Ann Patchett. I think she's a real author's author. These days, I've been reading The Ballerinas by Rachel Kapelke Dale, which is a great ballet thriller, if you can imagine that, set in Paris, which is always nice. Yeah, there's some, whenever you're asked that question, you kind of freeze, your brain just
I know.
It's crazy. And then there's all, my faves like Jamie Brenner, and Linda Loigman has a book coming out, The Matchmaker, which is a beautiful, beautiful book. There's just so much coming up down the pike. I'm really excited for The Christie Affair, which comes out very, very soon and is about Agatha Christie. Oh gosh, there's so much.
You've read that one, right?
Yes. Yeah, I loved it.
Already, yeah, that's going to be a great one. Look for The Christie Affair. I blurbed that one too, and I think it's wonderful too. Yeah, it's good. Well, I feel like maybe we're ready to wrap up a little bit here.
This has been amazing. Oh, thank you so much for doing this. You're the perfect partner in crime. And Rona, thank you for having me. Is there anything else we need to?
Well, I thank you both. You were great partners in crime, and it was a great discussion, and I enjoyed it as much as everyone else. We had a great audience, and can't wait to read the next book and read this one. I should tell people that while we couldn't have you in person, and I'm so sorry about that, you very graciously sent us signed book plates, which is I think these will have a certain marker and historic value of this is the COVID period of author visits, of the signed book plate book, as opposed to the, or the tipped in signed book kind of. So we have signed book plates. So I invite people to come to the BookMark and get a COVID version of a signed book, or go to our website at bookmarkbeach.com, and we'd be happy to send you one. It was very nice of you to do that. It does make it special, and it's a special bookmark, just book plate, just from you. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah,
and
thank you.
I encourage everybody. It's a cold weekend. You can't watch football all weekend. Curl up with your favorite drink of choice, whether it's coffee, tea, or wine, or hot chocolate, or a fire in the fireplace, and read The Magnolia Palace. You won't be sorry, but you will be doing it until you're done, because it's a hard one to put down. It's a delightful, smooth read that'll take you away from the world that we live in now, which can be complicated and very distracting. So it's nice to get so focused on something else. So I thank you for that great gift as always. And thank you so much, Christina, for making this such a wonderful conversation and a great evening. And I invite you both to come visit us at the beach. And in the meantime, stay safe. Don't get stuck in the blizzard. Hope you get home, Fiona, and that everybody is safe and warm. And thank you to everybody for listening. I really appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
so much.
everybody.
Yay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.